Honorable Program Facilitators, Speaker Mapisa Ngagula, and Minister of COGTA, Thembi Ngadime. His Excellency, the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, His Excellency, the Premier of the Western Cape, Premier Alwyn Wende, esteemed Excellencies, leaders of government, leaders of political parties, the diplomatic community, the media, colleagues, and community members. Greetings. Congratulations, Deputy President and the Presidency and the University of the Western Cape for hosting this timely event, and thank you for involving me. And DP, thank you also for those kind remarks. We meet in a climate of dysphoria. We are painfully watching our democracy descend into a dystopia. A key factor in our winter of discontent is the dysfunctionality of government, particularly at the coalface of governance and service delivery, being local government. This is what we've been told in the concept document. This is what we've been told in the speeches that have been presented to us, particularly the extensive speech by the Deputy President. The concept document opines that a key factor in local government dysfunctionality are unstable coalitions. The party submissions we are about to listen to confirm that unstable coalitions are indeed impacting negatively on governance and service delivery in our municipalities. The paper proposes several changes to the framework for coalitions. Key among those proposals being 6 principles to regulate the relationships and functioning of these coalition governments. It also proposes legal regulation. This platform right now, or this session right now, is a platform for political parties to provide us with their responses to the proposed framework and perspectives on factors of dysfunctionality, or rather factors behind the dysfunctionality of coalitions, together with their proposals for modifications. The solutions, of course, are informed by 2 things. Number 1 is, how do parties see the drivers of the problem? Secondly, what do they consider to be the non-negotiable guardrails for our democracy? I thought I would just take a minute to explain what I consider to be the guardrails as fundamental. Of course, it's the Constitution, as we've heard from the Premier, the DP, and others. We have an unusual Constitution that really provides a very clear framework of the society we're establishing. Charles Colson specifies in S versus Makwanyane that we're building a new society, and it's a society that will have us reimagine the relations within the society we're moving from. And this new society rests on 3 pillars: democratic governance, social justice, and fundamental human rights. And this should translate into improved lives of all citizens and free potential of every person. But it also gives us basic entitlements, the character of the state, structure of the state. And here we are in a winter of discontent, feeling that we have a great constitution, but experiencing dysphoria and a dystopic government among ourselves. But when it comes to the people, they see our constitution as a Potemkin constitution, glorious on the outside, empty on the inside. But here you are giving us hope that it really is not the constitution that is at fault, it's the implementation. And we are here to recommit yourselves, ourselves, and everyone to a new path. Well, the first political party to tell us how do we turn the situation around when it comes to coalitions is, we're calling them alphabetically. So the first one is the African National Congress. I'm not certain who's representing the party, but I see the Secretary General, the Honorable Mr. Figi Lembalula. Over to you, sir.
Amanda, you can say away to John, it's fine. Thank you very much, Prof, Program Director, the elders of our state, President Mutlante, the Deputy President of our country, Shipogoshe Paul Mashatile, fellow leaders of political parties. As the ANC, we also want to take the stage and wish Umdwana Kapinda Ngene a speedy recovery. The African National Congress takes the opportunity to welcome the National Dialogue on Coalition Governments. It is an important occasion to discuss and find sufficient consensus on measures that should be taken to address the intolerable degree and untenable situation of instability, disruption of governance, and service delivery in coalitions running our municipalities. It is our view as the ANC that legislative framework should be put in place to regulate coalition governments to safeguard democracy, sustainable development, governance, and service delivery. Having observed the disturbing developments in hung municipalities and metros, affected communities and citizens would have good reason to believe that collectively as political parties, we are only interested in power politics instead of addressing their needs. This dialogue should, through a sufficient degree of consensus, prove that we are truly and genuinely committed to stable, functional, developmental, and accountable government. We must therefore strive to come out of this dialogue with a framework that will lay a basis for new legislation. Such agreed framework must help restore our people's confidence in our constitutional democracy. Let me state from the onset that as the ANC, we are not here to talk about what should happen after 2024 elections. We are deeply concerned about the coalition chaos and instability in municipalities. This is what the regulatory framework should help to resolve. We are fully confident that 2024 will result in not us or anyone having outright majority to govern. Coalitions in their current free-floating institutional setup are not working for the people. They are not held together by any transparent safeguards and function as parley's maneuvers for back, wheeling and dealing. This makes them prone to collapse and, more worryingly, a tendency to disrupt the processes of governance for effective delivery of services to the people. In line with the Freedom Charter, the South African Democratic Movement continues to espouse the vision of a people-centered and people-driven participatory democracy in which the people shall govern. The people shall share in the country's wealth, the land shall be shared among those who work it, all shall enjoy equal human rights, etc., as some key defining features of our democracy. The health of our democracy should be measured by the well-being of citizens, as well as the stability and ability of democratic institutions to serve the people, even when there are changes after every 5-year electoral cycle. The principles that we are tabling as the African National Congress seek to remedy the instability, disruptions and dysfunctionality of coalition governments in our municipalities. There could be some who think that coalitions are a reflection of a maturing democracy, while others may think it is evidence of a failing democracy. On the contrary, we believe coalition governance is neither good nor intrinsically bad. It is their degree of effect on the functionality of governance systems in a given context that determines whether coalitions are good or bad. In democratic rationale, coalitions reflect split public opinion and a degree of political fragmentation where no party has been given a clear mandate to govern on its own. This is currently the case in 80 municipalities across the country. The chaos, instability, dysfunctionality, and collapse of service delivery in coalition municipalities has irked many patriots and citizens legitimately worry about their future under coalition governments. There is indisputable evidence and direct experience from citizens that since the advent of unregulated coalition governments in some of the major cities and towns, development and service delivery have moved in reverse. We have to arrest this negative development urgently and collectively. The African National Congress would like to put forward a set of measures and principles that must underpin the framework that can improve the functioning of hung councils and coalition government in our municipalities. We hereunder outline the set of measures and principles as follows. 1, coalitions must be based on a common minimum program, a citizens' charter that focuses on measurable targets to service delivery and development in the communities. Such a program must be made public and be subjected to discussions in community meetings. 2, coalition partners must commit to share values, stability, accountability, ethics and integrity, community participation, good governance, respect for the Constitution and the rule of law, social justice and equity, human dignity, non-racialism and non-sexism. 3, the party that has won the largest votes should lead the coalition in that municipality. An executive position should be allocated in proportion to the votes obtained by coalition partners. Coalition government should reflect the will of the people, not only deal-making among parties. 4, a threshold should be introduced so that there is a degree of legitimacy with regard to what amount of electoral support qualifies a party or candidate to be part of councils and coalition governments. 5, the law should be amended to ensure that public administration is insulated from coalition deal-making and bargaining, and that motions of no confidence are not abused. 6, coalition should be transparent and accountable to the people in their jurisdiction by giving quarterly reports and accounting to citizens on service delivery progress and milestone. 7, where no party has a clear majority, 50% plus 1, the executive committee system should be introduced by amending section 12 notices. 8, there should be an independent dispute resolution mechanism established to deal with any disputes among coalition partners. 9, the formula for allocating PR seats in councils is profoundly undemocratic and should be amended to reflect the will of the people. It punishes the parties that have won more votes. In this regard, and in pursuant to these principles and conditions, the ANC committed itself to the following. The ANC will prioritize working with parties, community-based organizations and civil society formations that are genuinely committed to stability, social justice, and ending apartheid colonialism in all its forms. Those who are divisive should not be considered. The ANC will avoid entering into coalition for the sake of ganging up against other parties. This is neither sustainable nor desirable in a country that faces deep socio-economic problems and has a history of racial divisions. A coalition should be about healing our divisions, capable and ethical governance that takes forward the vision of fundamental socio-economic transformation that benefits all citizens, as espoused in the Freedom Charter and the Constitution of the Republic. As a general principle, societies are always forced to evolve political systems to reflect both their moral intentions about and experiences from their efforts at progressive social transformation. South African society is now called upon to reflect on the insights we are gaining out of the past 30 years of democratic experimentation for fundamental social transformation. This discussion on evolving a viable coalition framework for our local government authorities must be viewed as part of this evolution of our political system, and discussion must retain loyalty to the shared moral intention to build an effective developmental state at all levels. In conclusion, the ANC notes that there will always be ideological, policy and political differences among parties in our political landscape. However, in each municipality, we are prepared to work with parties that are genuinely committed to stabilize municipalities so that they can provide services and promote development in communities. We are also keen to explore grand coalitions in order to ensure stability, service delivery, and local development. We believe these principles and legislative measures will restore public confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can political parties please try and stay within 10 minutes? I don't have the skills of the Speaker of Parliament to just come and say, your time is up. So when I approach you, just know that I'm saying your time is up. But I also look in my direction once in a while and I'll show you when you have 2 minutes. I'm now going to call an honorable representative of the DA to come and state their views.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to take much of my time. As a former public protector says, we only have 10 minutes. Can I please ask that the presentation that I have prepared please be flighted so that we can go through it as quickly as possible. Good morning to the Deputy President, the former President Kgalema Motlanthe, Madam Speaker, our hosts, Premier Wendy, leaders of political parties, civil society, academics, and invited guests. As our democracy matures, so too must our political system. And as our democracy rids itself, as it seems, of one-party domination, we as lawmakers need to step up and insulate citizens from the shifting political sands. It is absolutely important that as leaders we remember that it is the public that we serve and not ourselves. It is the public that suffers when coalition governments are unstable and not focused on service delivery. As the official opposition, we take our role very seriously, and that's why for the past year we have been working very hard to come up with legislative proposals. We have looked at international best practice, and we have compiled some proposed solutions which we would like to present to you today. The DA proposals are as follows. We are looking at 3 pieces of legislation that we would like to introduce. And one of these pieces of legislation has already been introduced in Parliament and is before the Portfolio Committee of Justice. They are listed on the screen. And ultimately, we've tried to seek the inputs of political parties that are represented in Parliament, because we do believe that at some point there are things that do transcend political interests. And so I'd like to go to the next slide. The first bill that we are looking at, which is the one that's already been introduced in Parliament, is the one that seeks to amend the Constitution. It is our view that the abuse of motions of no confidence, as we've seen in local councils, in fact has created the instability. And we believe that while motions of no confidence are an important accountability mechanism, they can in effect create the instability that we've seen if they've been abused. And so what we are seeking to do at a national level is to limit the amount of motions of no confidence to once a year, but also create a safety mechanism of saying, however, there can be motions of no confidence more than once in a year's period if there has been law broken, or if there has been an independent panel that does look at whether or not this motion does stand. And the reason for that is because we don't want to rid people of the ability to be able to pass motions of no confidence, but we need to make sure that they are not frivolous and they are not abused. The next slide, please. The other piece of legislation which is coming to Parliament shortly, and so I was very pleased to hear the Secretary General of the ANC talking about their desire for legislative proposals too, because I do believe that we ought to work together as political parties that are represented in Parliament, is simply the same thing, which is to amend the Municipal Structures Act. And this one is about limiting the motions of no confidence in a mayor or a speaker. Again, the idea here is to make sure that we instill stability. And we would have the same safety mechanism that I spoke about in the previous piece of legislation that would say, unless there has a law been broken, unless the independent panel that has been put together by the council can say that there is legitimacy in this motion, there shouldn't be a situation where a mayor, a president, or a premier can pass a budget and not even deliver against it. Next slide, please. The third piece of legislation, which is also coming before Parliament, has 2 essentially objectives. The one is to extend the time it takes for a government to be formed. Currently, the law says we've got 14 days to put together a government, and our view is that this should be extended to 30 days. The reason for that is that in a scenario where there is coalition governments, you cannot really realistically put together a coalition government that is highly contentious in a really pressurized situation where you only have 2 weeks. We believe that this is a non-contentious introduction, and we think that it should enjoy multi-party support because it's really about the idea of extending the time it takes. We've seen internationally how long our German colleagues are here will tell you how long it took them to negotiate their coalition governments, and so these are not easy things, and so we can extend the time. What the bill also will seek to set an electoral threshold at a local council level. Our view is that the seat quotas, as we have seen them, or at least require a political party to be able to put together one seat, and so that they are not just simply beneficiaries of votes that were not allocated. We're of the view that also this is important for representation, that you need to have the legitimacy of the people that have voted for you. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. Other key stable coalition government principles that we have come up with are electoral thresholds at a national and a provincial level. These are not in the 3 pieces of legislation that are coming before Parliament, but these are some of our proposals that we think are really, really important. The introduction of a political ombudsman, the publication and the registration of coalition agreements, and coalition agreements that may have legal standing. Next slide, please. Electoral thresholds are quite common around the world, and a lot of people may argue that they may defy the principle of representative democracy. And our view really is that the Constitution does provide for general representation, and having an electoral threshold would not be taking that away. And I've listed there a number of countries, both on the continent and around the world, that have instituted electoral thresholds. And we do believe that having political parties that have essentially a lot to lose will mean that they take their role in a coalition agreement quite seriously. Next slide, please. The idea of a political registrar is really borrowed from the Kenyan model of their political act of 2007, where they have a political registrar essentially, which is the administrative head of managing coalition governments. Because of course we understand that these are political agreements and by nature are contentious. But when you are able to take away the administrative management of coalition governments, actually the administering of the agreements, the publishing of the agreements, so that the public can hold you accountable to something that has been published, and not just gentlemen's agreements that are agreed to behind closed doors, but these transparent agreements. We're of the view that this could go a long way. Next slide, please. Our view is that all political parties that are represented in Parliament, and I say represented in Parliament, of course, because we would really like these 3 proposed bills that we've put before Parliament to be passed before the end of this term. Our view is that research is showing us that we are likely to see hung legislatures across provinces. We could potentially even see a hung national legislature. And it cannot be that as members of Parliament we are found flat-footed when it comes to lawmaking. We've got to catch up with the political system, and our country is showing us that we need to be ready. And so we are really using and imploring this platform this morning to say, we have come up with solutions, and a lawmaking process is a robust one. We may not agree on every single principle, but that's why there is such a long and really open process to engage the public, to engage one another in Parliament, so that we can panel beat some of these proposals and come up with solutions that are going to better serve South Africans. I think it's high time, and we can agree, all of us, that it has been the people of South Africa who have been on the losing end of some of our unstable coalition governments, and we cannot see that instability replicated at a provincial or a national level. And I really do hope that I can count on your support. And of course, we also are really interested in the inputs of academics, experts in this lawmaking process, so that we can come up with the best product possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Siviwe Kwahube. And I think that applause was also partly because you stuck to time. So thank you, ma'am. We are now going to have a representative from the EFF. Do we have somebody from the EFF? All right. We're going to jump in the absence of that because we don't have time. Honorable Thabisa, we need a representative from the IFP. Will it be you, sir? Okay, please take the podium.
Program Director, the Honorable Deputy President, the honored guest, I observe the protocol. Let me begin by saying, on behalf of the IFP and Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, I want to convey our gratitude for the support the people of South Africa are giving to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi during this critical time in his life. Thank you, South Africa. Inkatha Freedom Party is the fourth largest political party in South Africa and was established by our founder and President Emeritus, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, in 1975. Our party exists to serve and has done so faithfully for almost 50 years. As the IFP, we acknowledge that coalitions are here to stay. We have also witnessed the failure of coalition governments at local level for a variety of reasons. We are dedicated to the pursuit of functional coalition governments whether it will be at a local, provincial, or national level. And we are committed to doing the work needed to ensure that these governments are functional so that they can provide the services to our people. It is for this reason that the IFP has joined these discussions today, and that we will be meeting with fellow opposition parties later this month to further explore what is needed for coalition governments to succeed. Let me take just a minute here. In the interest of the people of South Africa, the IFP over the past 2 months have been engaged in advanced discussion in preparation for the National Convention to take place on 16 to 17 August at Kempton Park at Emperor's Palace to find alternatives to ensure that next year we are not caught unprepared, as an example of COJ. The IFP would like to state for the record that we are willing to work with any political party that shares our values and has the goal of improving the lives of the millions of South Africans that battle for survival daily due to poverty, inequality, and rampant unemployment. Further, the IFP makes the same pledge to further coalition partners as it does to our supporters. You can trust us. The IFP is a party committed to the values of servant leadership and good governance with a proven track record. We appreciate the work that has been done in preparation for this dialogue and have studied the discussion papers, which contain some valuable insight. However, we believe it is very ambitious to believe that the question of coalition governments can be discussed and resolved in a day and a half. Our point of departure should firstly be to define the different types of coalitions and to determine whether or not the coalition-making process needs to be defined. All those that have read the documents made available, as well as done their own research, will know that there are different schools of thoughts, either or written agreements between political parties. The IFP is willing to consider regulations if such will be of equal benefit to all parties involved, of benefit to the electorate, and in line with the Constitution. Based on our experiences and research thus far, the IFP believes the following 4 elements are essential for building strong coalition and is committed to each element. These elements are communication, consultation, consensus, and compromise. The communication element is threefold. Each party must keep the lines of communication open with their internal structures to build support and identify challenges and issues from party structures. Potential coalition partners must share information, communicate honestly, and agree on decision-making processes. The coalition must communicate with the public at large and highlight goals and accomplishments. We believe this national dialogue could be considered to form part of the communication element as various stakeholders are gathered to share information. The next step will be consultation. This is essential to the success of any coalition and provides a safe space for parties to try to understand the other's points of view. It also be used as an opportunity to establish conflict resolution processes. Consensus building is possibly the most time-consuming element to the process, as parties need to find common ground. In South Africa, there are many voices, but I'm certain that most opposition parties present here today will agree that they want to build a just and prosperous societies with opportunities for all. Parties with a people-first ethos will find much in common. Compromises will, however, always be needed. No two political parties are in 100% agreement. The goal should be to find middle ground where all involved are comfortable. In conclusion, Program Director, I want to remind all of us here today that we are called to serve the public, from those in the national government to our provincial government and the local government structures. There is no silver bullet to solve the coalition government issues. However, if we are all committed to set aside selfish ambitions and put the needs of people first, I believe we can find a way to make coalition governments work for people of South Africa. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you, Honorable Velonkosi Hlabisa, and I join you and everyone in wishing the Honorable Buthelezi a speedy recovery. The next speaker to address us is from the Freedom Front Plus, and I suspect it's going to be Dr. Groenewald? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, and as I say, all protocol reserved. Honorable Deputy President, I've listened carefully what you have said, and you actually concluded by saying that in the end, we want good governance with zero tolerance towards corruption. Now, Honourable Deputy President, maybe we should have a national dialogue on why we are here today where we are in South Africa when it comes to governments. But the topic for this dialogue is, of course, coalitions. I want to start by a remark and a quote from Professor Jaap de Visser, and I quote, "It is not possible to legislate political behavior or force political parties into stable coalitions. Much of such efforts would be unconstitutional anyhow." Close quote. And that is important, what we must remember. When we look at our Constitution, we say the Constitution introduced an overall proportional electoral regime, and proportionality favors coalition governments as it enhances multi-party representation. And that's what the Freedom Front Plus has always said. As our democracy matures, multi-party governments are becoming a reality. Political parties and the electorate is, however, inexperienced with regards to coalition governments. I always say that we are going through a learning curve in South Africa as far as coalitions are concerned. That includes the electorate as well as the politicians. What are the guiding principles of the Freedom Front Plus? The Freedom Front Plus agrees with the following principles: putting the people first, committed to combating poverty as well as building a growing and inclusive economy, contribute towards building a prosperous society and meaningful participation in the economy, committed to building a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united and prosperous society. And we are committed to good governance with no tolerance for corruption. It seems the Deputy President took a quote, or what I wanted to say today. The Freedom Front Plus disagrees that the party that has secured the largest number of votes should be the party to lead the coalition, and the executive positions should be allocated proportionally to the votes obtained by the coalition partners. And the reason we say that is this will not be conducive to the establishment of effective multi-party governments and will undermine the very fabric of the formation of coalitions. Much is said about electoral reform. From our side, we say an electoral system on its own accord cannot determine the workability, stability, accountability, principles and partners of coalition governments. No electoral system can do that. You don't have a fit for all or a perfect electoral system for each and every country. Most suitable systems should be determined in relation to the applicable requirements in the context of the circumstances of the country. Specifically in South Africa, we must look into our historical context, the promotion of reconciliation, broad representation, enhancing multi-party participation and representation, sustainable electoral processes, and ensuring representation of the diverse societies, to name a few. Electoral reform could easily be abused by a governing party who is losing power. Such reform could undermine true democracy. So we will have to look very carefully when we talk about electoral reform. When it comes to legislative reform, Keep in mind the quote I gave of Professor de Visser. We in the Freedom Front say that an electoral threshold will undermine constitutional principles aimed at healing the divisions of the past and establishing a society based on democratic values in which the government is determined by the will of the people. A threshold will create divisions by excluding minority groups from having a voice in legislatures, and it will also exclude independent candidates from being elected. It will deter conventional political participation and so doing undermine the values enshrined in the Constitution. The Constitution should be amended to allow for at least 30 days between the declaration of the election results and the election of the President by the National Assembly. Such will allow for sufficient time for coalition negotiations and the conclusion of agreements. Legislation should obligate the publication of coalition agreements, and legislation should limit the tabling of motions of no confidence to 1 per annum. When it comes to local government, we talk about the Municipal Structures Act. We believe in 1 motion of no confidence in an office bearer per annum. And we also say that the current proportional composition of collective executive committees to allow for the formation of coalition governments and multi-party representation regardless of the applicable mayoral system. We also say that to avoid the intimidation and bribery of councillors, all votes on motions of no confidence and the elections of office bearers should be open, and no provision for secret ballots should be allowed. In conclusion, I want to say again, all legislative reforms in this regard should be based on values which will uphold a system of multi-party participation and should not suppress the principles of true democracy. I thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Peter Groenewald. Our next speaker is Mr. the Honorable Wayne Thring, MP, Deputy President of the ACDP. Over to you, sir. You have 10 minutes.
On behalf of our ACDP President, the Reverend Dr. Kenneth Meshwe, I wish to greet our Deputy President, former President Motlanthe, leaders of political parties, Western Cape Premier, and with all protocol observed, allow me to state that the African Christian Democratic Party is no stranger to coalition politics. From the early 2000s, the ACDP was one of the first political parties to enter into a coalition with the DA in the Western Cape, amongst other political parties. And we were instrumental in the drafting of the first coalition agreement documents, which are still in use, perhaps with some amendments. That coalition, however, did not go well for us. Perhaps if we had legislation in place then, the signatories to the agreement would have honored it for the full term. It must be made abundantly clear that the African Christian Democratic Party has always supported a constitutional democracy. We've asked ourselves, what type of democracy? We must ask ourselves, what type of democracy is envisioned and supported by our Constitution? And even an elementary read will confirm that our Constitution supports a multi-party democracy. Clearly then, if the Constitution supports a multi-party democracy, then this must be factored into any legislative amendments or coalition systems and agreements that are to be developed going forward. It must be made abundantly clear that the cause of the collapse of the majority of municipalities is not coalitions, but corruption, nepotism, and a flouting of the rule of law. The Auditor General's report will confirm that. The ACDP concurs with the Prevention Technology Transfer Center Network, PTTC, who state that there are 6 elements that support an effective coalition, namely, 1, goal-directedness. There must be a common goal or shared vision. 2, efficiency, which ensures a high work ethic to utilize resources to deliver services in a well-organized and effective manner. 3, opposition for participation. Members must be able to take on formal positions within the coalition that are tied to their expertise, abilities, and interests. 4, cohesion. This is synergistic collaboration which develops strong interpersonal relationships and increased commitment. 5, diverse stakeholders. Successful coalitions represents a diverse set of sectors representing a broader group of stakeholders in the community. And finally, new skills. As a coalition builds and enhances its functioning, the acquisition and fostering of new knowledge and skills amongst its members increases the effectiveness of the coalition in achieving its outcomes. Allow me to quote Dr. Pierre de Vos in the literary work Marriages of Inconvenience, where he states, "The South African Constitution does not contain specific provisions regulating the formation and functioning of coalition governments in the national, provincial, and local spheres of government. Neither does ordinary legislation contain such specific regulatory provisions. However, the Constitution establishes a hybrid version of the system of parliamentary government, which applies at the national, provincial, and, with slight variations, local government level. And the choice of this system has important consequences for how coalition governments are formed and how they operate. In this regard, it is the view of the ACDP that positive legislation, and I emphasize positive legislation, must be put in place without negating the principle of a multi-party democracy. The ACDP fully understands that coalitions are at a local government level are fractious and unstable, and as a result, some legislative amendments may be necessary. With regards to the professionalization of our civil service, motions of no confidence, and the time period given to elect senior executive members after an election, what the ACDP will not support is the minimum threshold of valid votes cast in order to qualify for a seat. We view this as counter to the spirit of our Constitution, which I alluded to earlier, hence unconstitutional and certainly undemocratic when read in terms with section 1521A and D in particular. The minimum threshold proposal is, in our view, exclusive, and it uses a sledgehammer approach to a problem that can quite easily be solved by legislation which ties coalition members into their agreement for the full 5-year term of office. In conclusion, the ACDP asserts that all political parties must never forget why we exist, and that is to serve the people of South Africa. The ACDP understands servant leadership. In the last 2 municipalities where we are coalition partners, the ACDP has not demanded MMC positions, even though we could, or executive positions, because our priority is our citizens and effective service delivery. The moment we forget the reason why we exist as political parties is the moment we fail to become relevant to ordinary South Africans. The ACDP will not forget, and we refuse to fall into the category of irrelevance in the hearts and minds of South Africans. Thank you.